You're listening to Puff Digital's Into the Weeds podcast, brought to you in part by Puff Puff Posts and HigherMentality.com.
The new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell.
When did you try cannabis? Let's because I have a feeling it's going to be at a younger age for you.
Oh yeah,
it's going to be early in the
story. That would have been actually. I was back home this summer visiting my family, and they were surprised that there's not a plaque up because it was in a junior high school girls' washroom. Was the first time. Yeah. At a Catholic junior high school in a very small town in Ontario.
Really?
Yeah. Which is why I laugh when people talk about, prohibition stops access. It's like I was 13 years old. I was going to a Catholic junior high school, and it was no problem, right?
Yeah.
So,
what was the temperature of the cannabis around there? Obviously, it's a Catholic school, so very probably.
It was actually hash for the most part. We didn't get cannabis very often, right? We're very close to Montreal, so hash was the really big thing. So I didn't actually get to start smoking like cannabis. Even Edmonton didn't. You'd only get cannabis when the tree planters came back, right? Yeah. So I didn't actually start to get to smoke actually flower until I lived in New York.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the first hash, the time you smoked hash, there, what was it like? And if it's all hash and stuff like that, but was it a huge no-no? Were you guys was it a really, really bad thing? If you got caught, would have you been expelled?
Probably. Yeah, probably. Yeah. It certainly wasn't common, right? I mean, it was easy to find, but it wasn't you certainly didn't talk about it very openly other than with your friends in your small group. I mean, I also got involved in theater very early. I directed my first show when I was 16. So being involved in sort of an arts crowd helps as well, right? And be a little bit more open about drug use and things like that.
Yeah. And was it more for the experience of it, or is it the rebellion for you? I think it's going to have.
I honestly don't remember. I honestly just my friend Lisa had it. Let's try it. All right. Oh, that's nice, right?
Yeah,
and then I started smoking.
And then after that, you smoked weed or hash
pretty much with hash. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
occasionally weed, but really it wasn't until New York that I was able to get weed consistently.
What small town was that you were in?
That would have been Cornwall. I would have been back in Cornwall
Vegas.
at that point. Yeah.
Nice.
Cornwall.
What'd you say?
Corn Vegas.
Corn Vegas.
Yeah, honestly, there's great pizza out there.
In Cornwall.
Cornwall has amazing pizza. And people get into huge polarizing debates about which place is better. There's one called Northside and then another one. Mm. And you either like one or the other. I think there's actually West Side Story gang fights over the pizza out there.
In Cornwall,
there's gang fights over everything there. But
Cornwall. That's I've heard rough things about Cornwall.
I hadn't been back in a long time, and going back this summer was sad. Cornwall's always been a very weird town. It's had an English downtown and a French downtown, and the French downtown has just gone so far downhill, and now it almost looks like West Hastings. It's shocking actually to see.
Wow. Yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah.
So is it like the opioid crisis and stuff like that?
Yep.
Just hitting it hard.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame. Were your parents creative? When did you get? You must have got the creative bug early if you're directing your first play at 16.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I think my dad was an instrument technician. My stepdad was a pipeliner. My mom was a teacher when she was very young, but then she had 4 kids to raise. Mm-hmm. Then she became a teacher again after. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, but there's something weird in my family, right? My grandmother's the youngest of 13 kids, and the oldest had to lie to go work at this factory before she was old enough to work to be able to support all of her brothers and sisters. And my grandmother ended up going to university and teaching, not teaching. She ended up teaching later, but she went to university and worked in a law office. And, that was a time when women didn't really go to university and do that stuff. So, I don't know what it is. That there was always sort of an openness in the French part of my family, which is sort of bizarre because it was, there was a conservativeness to it on the outside, but there was also just this openness to discussing ideas and things like that. Whenever we'd talk about race, for example, my grandmother would always be like, who knows? I don't know what we got in there, and looking at how, promiscuous and French my family is, it's not surprising. Who knows, right? That's the right answer. So,
really?
It was weird. It was kind of a conservative upbringing in some ways, but it was like a Canadian conservative upbringing, and none of them would consider themselves big C conservatives, right? So, yeah.
Did you always have the edge, the you're very like you're confrontational, and I mean that in the best way possible. Do you know what I mean? Was that always in you from then?
Yeah. When I lived in Edmonton, I spent about 6 months at the peace camp when we were protesting the Iraq War. I had no blood for oil painted on my jeans. And, and I was always sort of I never really fit in boxes, right? And so that was also part of starting in theater really early. Just kind of let me dress however I wanted. So wear ripped jeans all the time, and paint them up and stuff like that. So, always a little bit of an oddball. First of all, what was your first play? You said you did your first show. Was it an original? Yeah, it was actually called Girl in the Mirror. It was a play about suicide.
Oh, wow.
And we toured all over Ontario.
What?
We toured all over Ontario to different schools I was also a peer counselor at the time, and so we would travel with peer counselors. And so we'd show up, and somebody from the school would kind of give a speech about, there's peer counselors in the back, and if the play just gets too heavy, just leave if you have to leave. And then somebody would kind of follow up and see if they were okay. Yeah. It was a really cool experience. We even had, like, one time we were in the show outside of our 3 counties, and we did the show in the morning, and then apparently somebody at home had killed themselves at the one school that we didn't go to.
Oh my God.
And somebody from that school that we had performed at in the morning drove all the way to the next town to tell us that in the afternoon, because they knew they'd find out before us. And so there was this really cool little network that was building up, and normally there were 3 or 4 suicides a year just in those 3 counties. I think I keep hitting my ring on the table.
You keep tapping your hand, and that's picking up little beats.
Gotcha.
So sorry about that.
No worries. But so it was a suicide play. While I was doing heavy stuff like that, I was also doing improv and things. So
comedy too.
Balance, yeah.
So that's wild. So you've been kind of doing, essentially that was kind of laying the groundwork for what you would later do in cannabis.
Very much so.
You know what I mean? Like helping people and showing that people there's other way.
Theater was always that for me. There was, theater, most art forms, I feel there's 2 things that it does, right? It can either just entertain, or it can really make you think and deal with issues. And I like both, right? And I like to do both of those. I don't really like the stuff in the middle. So
Yeah. And so you said improv, and I know you've done stand-up as well. So let's talk about that too, because I think it's important to see all sides of you, not just the serious activist.
Well, I was stuck. So I was supporting my husband. My ex-husband was American, and his mother couldn't really walk around very much, and we had a dog. And we were trying to move them up to Canada, and I'd done contract work like my entire life, and suddenly that wasn't good enough. So I had to quit and get a job. I was actually writing a screenplay about a driving instructor at the time. I knew nothing about it, and there was an ad in the paper in Vancouver about becoming a driving instructor. So I did. And I did that for a couple of years. By the end of that, I wrote an ICBC approved course to teach people how to drive, as well as teaching people how to drive and all of that. So while I was doing that, I was bored. So I was like, what the hell? I'll go do stand-up comedy. And I went to this open mic thing, and then they asked me to come back the next week to pay me. And then they asked me to come back the next week and do twice as much of a set and paid me more. And then they wanted me to go on a tour. And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I need to stay here and do this for that. So, yeah. So I haven't really done it since.
But it worked for you.
Surprisingly, actually, I didn't really think it would, but there's things about the art form. Like if you understand different art forms and different styles of communication, you realize that you can get away with a lot. Like a lot of stand-up jokes, when you write them down, they're not funny. It actually has to do with the context. It has to do with the timing, delivery, and the pacing. Yes, I always got the biggest laugh on what I thought was my stupidest joke. Yeah. Like my favorite joke was always third or fourth, like never first. Yeah. Right. So yeah. Literally, the one I thought was the worst always got the biggest laugh.
Is it long, or can we hear it? Or would you rather not?
No, it's just it's a little bit long. It just talks. There's the intro changes, but the punchline was sort of like, it's been a frustrating day, and I just on my way here I was attacked by a group of Japanese animators. I had a joke about it, but it's too long and drawn out.
Yeah.
Always, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's not a good joke, but well.
I fell hook, line, and sinker. I thought you were just bypassing. That's a great fucking joke.
Yeah, that is amazing.
That's a great joke.